Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I hereby call the meeting to order. This is an open meeting of the USAGM's Board of Governors being held in compliance with the Government in the Sunshine Act. A digital recording of this meeting will be available for on-demand viewing on the agency's new website, www.usagm.gov. Joining me today are Governors Aaron, Crocker, Kempner, Kornblue, and Schell. Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs Michelle Guida is necessarily absent. She is represented today ably by her Chief of Staff, Jennifer Hall Godfrey. Today is, of course, September 11th. According to the, yeah, exactly. We need to change the PowerPoint. Today is, yeah, boy. I was wondering what the confusion was down there. Okay. Well, today is, of course, September 11th. It's obviously a painful anniversary for all of us around the table here, all of us in the USAGM family. The board was gathered to meet here 18 years ago today. The meeting never happened. That day obviously changed all of our lives forever, and certainly the work we do here as an agency. As we expanded into the Middle East, into South and Central Asia. And it's normal that you celebrate these anniversaries only on the even years and the 5 years, but I think it is, and all of us around the table feel this way, that it's important to take time every year and remember the lives lost on that day, obviously the acquaintances, the friends, and those who suffered the loss of loved ones. The pain never goes away, but also those who have lost their lives since, the heroic men and women and their families, the Gold Star families, those in the armed forces who have made sacrifices every day since. Of course, we think of our friends in the diplomatic corps who lost their lives, and we also think of those who have lost their lives on 9/11 and since, as we battle the scourge of radical Islam in the media as well, including our colleagues here at the USAGM. So let's have a moment of silence before we get underway. Thank you. And continuing on that note, oppressive regimes continue to seek to control, distort, and hide information from their citizens, and every day our journalists work tirelessly, work hard to keep that from happening by providing the truth. From Iraq to Cambodia to Tajikistan, our journalists face harassment, physical violence, and jail time simply for telling the truth. Let's take a look at this video.
All around the world, USAGM journalists face threats, harassment, and intimidation in an effort to prevent them from reporting the truth. Trung Doi Nhat, an imprisoned RFA Vietnamese service blogger, was listed as one of the most urgent press freedom cases in the world, according to One Free Press Coalition, a global press freedom initiative in which all USAGM networks participate. Nhat was forcibly disappeared in January 2019 in Bangkok, Thailand, where he had applied for refugee status. In March, RFA learned he had been jailed without charge in Hanoi. Nhat is one of 3 journalists working for USAGM-supported networks being held in Vietnam. Nguyen Van Hoa, a citizen journalist who worked with RFA's Vietnamese service, is serving a 7-year sentence for his reporting that was critical of the government. He has been beaten and harassed in prison. Lu An Hung, a blogger and political contributor to VOA's Vietnamese service, was arrested in July 2018 and is being held in prison while he awaits trial on charges of, quote, abusing democratic freedoms. If convicted, he could face 7 years. The Phnom Penh Municipal Court has postponed a verdict in the trial of former RFA Khmer Service journalists Wan Chin and Yuang Sutharan. The two were arrested on wholly unsubstantiated espionage charges in the wake of RFA being forced to close its Phnom Penh bureau in the fall of 2017. Human Rights Watch, Reporters Without Borders, UNHCR, and 25 members of Congress have joined RFA and USAGM in calling for the charges to be dropped. Iraq's media regulator, the Communications and Media Committee, suspended the broadcasting license and activities of Al Hura Television after an August 31st investigative report uncovered alleged corruption within the Sunni and Shiite Muslim endowments linked to senior religious authorities in Iraq. The report also implies ties between these state bodies and armed groups. The broadcasting suspension will last 3 months, but the media regulator said Al Hura's activities are suspended until it corrects its position and broadcasts an official apology for tarnishing the reputation of Iraqi religious institutions and figures. Al Hura Television stands by its reporting. In June, VOA Zimbabwe service Nunurai Jena was detained after taking photographs at a police roadblock. He was released after 3 hours without charge. VOA South Sudan stringer Viola Elias was detained by security officers after interviewing children shining shoes near a customs market for a story on child labor. Security officers released her after several hours, but kept her recorder. On June 9th, Kazakh authorities detained 2 RFERL journalists and refused accreditation to 7 more during a tightly controlled snap election intended to name a successor to former President Nazarbayev, who resigned in March. On July 6th, men in black masks appearing to be security agents tried to block RFERL Kazakh service reporters from filming the detention of protesters. The aggressors attacked RFERL reporter Orkan Bisanov and cameraman Irzan Amirkanov with gas spray, broke a camera tripod and lights, and used umbrellas to block their views. Police were on the scene but did not intervene despite the RFERL personnel asking for help. And on July 22nd, RFERL reporters and other journalists were covering a press conference when an unknown group of women attacked them. Several women attacked RFERL reporter Nurjul Topayeva and cameraman Tokmolda Kusainov, damaging the video camera. In a brazen example of the government's efforts to control independent press, Tajikistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has revoked the accreditation of RFERL video journalist Baratali Nazarov for his reporting. In August, during a press conference in Dushanbe, the foreign minister remarked, "We will never close Radio Ozodi here, but we will probably not register those employees of Radio Ozodi who let in their articles even the smallest damage of current state policy." On August 19th, the Russian Duma announced a commission to investigate, quote, foreign meddling in the internal affairs of Russia, following recent mass protests in Moscow over the forthcoming city council elections. The Duma said the commission will summon foreign journalists for questioning, including those from media affiliated with the State Department and USA funds. RFERL videos of the protests have garnered millions of views on social media. The Federal News Agency, sponsored by Russian billionaire and so-called Putin's chef Yevgeny Prigozhin, has published a media classifier that considers current time, the Russian services of RFERL and VOA, RFERL's Tatar-Bashkir service, North Caucasus service, and 4 of RFERL's Russian regional news sites as foreign media, publishing anti-Russian content. Recently, Tatar-Bashkir service journalists were refused accreditation to cover the United Russia Party primaries in Tatarstan, even though all necessary documentation had been provided. At the same time, Russia's federal government, formed by the same United Russia Party and led by the head of that party, has for years refused to register RFERL to work legally on Russian territory. USAGM and RFERL urged the release of Stanislav Aseyev and Oleg Halazyuk, 2 RFERL Ukrainian service contributors being held by Russia-backed separatists in Donetsk. Both men were taken separately and are held incommunicado. For more information, please visit usagm.gov.
Every time we see these videos, it sends chills up and down our spines thinking of the sacrifices that our journalists make in the field. The fact that these regimes go after them is just another sign, however, of just how effective this agency has been. And without the dedication of our men and women, millions of people around the world would not have access to the truth. Let's now turn to the board business. The presence of 5 or more governors satisfies the quorum requirement. A quorum being present, the board may conduct business based on a majority vote. On August 28th, the board received email materials for the consent agenda, which allowed sufficient time for all governors to review the agenda prior to this meeting. We did not receive comments from any of the governors. The consent agenda is in the board book at tabs 1 through 3. At this time, I'd like to ask if any governors have any comments on the consent agenda. None being heard, let me ask if any governors wish to move for adoption of the consent agenda by the board. Ambassador Kornblue, is there a second? Great. Governor Kempner was beat you there. Ambassador Crocker, great. All in favor, please say aye. Aye, great. Any objections? Okay, there being none, we now move forward with the public comment section of the meeting. The board permits members of the public who register to attend our open meetings the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes. I understand we have a member of the public here today who would like to make comments. Ann Noonan of the Committee for U.S. International Broadcasting, please come up to the table and introduce yourself before you speak. Ann, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. My name is Ann Noonan. I'm the Executive Director for the Committee for U.S. International Broadcasting. Good morning on this 9/11 anniversary, a most somber day that calls us as Americans to know how one day can change the world. Hong Kong is at a breaking point, yearning for the freedoms that we here in the U.S. often take for granted. Thanks to these brave journalists, the plea for help from Hong Kongers is being heard. We know about Hong Kong students who have initiated petitions and rallies against the proposed extradition law as they seek political reform to achieve universal suffrage. The efforts of pro-democracy students in Hong Kong have been joined by thousands of Hong Kong mothers who gathered in solidarity, 2 million Hong Kong residents who have peacefully marched in their streets, residents and more students who have formed human chains throughout Hong Kong, and civil servant workers, counselors, caregivers, and therapists, and social workers and religious groups who have taken part by striking. Hong Kongers have been singing their hearts out with the Christian hymn, Sing Hallelujah to the Lord, Les Mises, Do You Hear the People Sing, and recently, Glory to Hong Kong. They've even been singing the Star-Spangled Banner. A bloody eye patch has become a Hong Kong symbol in tribute to a protester who was shot in the eye. Reports of Hong Kong's brutal police force that has used rubber bullets, tear gas, and pepper spray, blue dye, and water cannons, and beating people, including the elderly and even defenseless children, has become too much to bear. Hong Kong needs our help. Their own residents are at our door asking. Reports from this agency should be supporting this effort and not giving equal voice to Carrie Lam, as has been done in at least one of VOA Chinese September 9th social media postings that only offered her anti-USA message. Nothing else in that posting even mentioned the voice of Hong Kongers or American legislators who initiated the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. USAG's mission as soft power needs to be used properly. During the Tiananmen Square massacre, Chinese students could rely upon VOA to cover their message without giving equal time or any time to the oppressors. If Carrie Lam needs to be quoted, can't VOA say how this relates back to CCP's own propaganda to divert attention from the suppression of basic human rights in Hong Kong? This is but one example of how and why VOA China branch needs a clear vision and understanding of their role during this critical time. As efforts to cover Hong Kong become more and more demanding, the VOA Cantonese service staffs are rotating to join Mandarin TV team in Hong Kong for the 1-hour daily program operation. More VOA resources need to be in place, as they were 30 years ago in Tiananmen Square. Finally, VOA Cantonese service still needs a bureau chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann, for your comments, and I want to remind members of the public to please register and speak at our next board meeting. We value your comments and take them seriously. Now we return to the CEO and Director's report. This is a bittersweet day at the agency. As announced on September 5th, after 4 years of serving as the first Chief Executive and Director of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, John F. Lansing will be leaving USAGM. He has accepted the position as the President and CEO of National Public Radio, NPR. His tenure is going to come to an end here at the USAGM at the end of this month. John, of course, joined USAGM at a pivotal time in the history of U.S. international media, provided the vision and the collaborative spirit to drive growth and innovation during some of the most trying times for global press freedom. He has been, in my mind, a model CEO, and he's been a teacher to me and to all of us here at the agency and around the table. He's been bold but collaborative, forthright, farsighted, and the agency is infinitely better thanks to your tenure, thanks to your public service, thanks to your dedication to our mission. And all of us are very grateful and deeply impressed by what you have achieved for the USAGM. All of us will sorely miss you. We offer heartfelt thanks for your absolutely transformative leadership, and we wish you the very best. I know other board members will want to join me in thanking you, but I want to ask everyone to please join in a round of applause for John. Let me ask the other governors to comment and embarrass John. Let's see if we can get him to turn bright red.
That doesn't take much.
Let's see who can do it first. Governor Kemper.
John, it's really been one of the privileges of my life to work with you. And the day we met, it was clear to me that you were a special kind of manager. Not just with a great vision for this organization, but for a great vision on how to get the best out of people and create an environment where people wanted to come and work hard and do great things every day. So I appreciate all that you've done, but frankly, all that you've taught me as well along the way. And your accomplishments are many, and you will be very missed by this organization. And I'm sure all the other organizations under your authority. But at the same time, where you're going is an extraordinarily exciting and interesting opportunity, and will also has a huge and important impact on society. And we look forward to you continuing on your mission to do that. So thank you,
Michael.
So, John, I think I first heard your name in the context of this job from Rick Stengel, so I do want to give him a little credit and State Department a little credit. That's where your name, I think, came through. I think when we first met, I said the first CEO is a very tough job of this place, and I think the board's unanimous. I agree with what Michael just said, that you could not have literally done a better job as the first CEO of this place, and you've set a model that future CEOs will hope to fill. It will be difficult, but you've actually set the model for this place, and you've done tremendous work. I think it's ironic and fitting that your final board meeting is on 9/11, because I think for you and for all of the dedicated people around the table and outside the building, this is a job of serving your country, first and foremost. This is not just some other, corporate job. You've done great work for your country. You've transformed this place in the last 4 years, and you've been everything that we hoped you would be. So congratulations from me.
Thank you, Jeff. Former chairman. May I?
Sure, any.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
Carlo.
Yeah, I just want to mention the work that you did helping support the incredibly talented team here, both bringing people in, but then helping folks who are here to work better together, giving them the support they needed, clearing out a lot of the underbrush. I mean, I think part of your being a leader and a manager was supporting the team around you. And it's been wonderful to watch how everybody's been able to be the best they can be because of the environment that you've created. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks. As I've said before in a different setting, as I look back on the now, 6 years that I and some of my colleagues have been on the board, without question, the best decision this board made during those 6 years was to hire you, John, as CEO.
Thank you.
And I would echo my colleagues. You have been a brilliant and inspirational leader, and just as important, you have brought in an A-team and transformed, literally, this organization all the way to a new name. So it is a vastly, vastly different and vastly better organization today than it was when I first sat at this table 6 years ago. And you were that element of positive change. As much as we're going to miss you, we will continue to benefit from all that you've done in bringing in the right people to the right places at just the right time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. So, oh, I'm sorry,
Okay,
Leah.
sorry. Oops.
Very little to say after all of this. So, John, thanks so much. Condolences to us. Congratulations to you. And I will listen to NPR.
No.
Thank you.
Just, Leon, you've disappointed me for the first time. Just kidding.
Thank you, Leah.
I just want to add my congratulations, John, and to thank you for your many years of service to USAGM. It's clear in the year that I've been able to participate as a member of the team, if not as a member of the board, that your dedication to fulfilling USAGM's mission and setting high standards for USAGM for the quality of work expected of everyone here has brought benefits to the agency and the grantees. And I hope that the board and the next CEO are able to continue to model those demanding standards. So,
Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to the State Department for the support that has been there from Rick Stengel straight up through Michelle and with you. I appreciate it. Governors, thank you very much. It's been the honor of my career. It truly has, and I've enjoyed working with you, Chairman Weinstein, and certainly Chairman Schell. So I had, I think, about an equal 2 years apiece. So that was a
Poor guy.
a good deal for me. So I'm truly a bipartisan guy, I guess. But the team that we've put together here, the ICC team and the senior management team, and to Karen's point, both those that were here already and those that we were fortunate enough to bring on board, it really is the best team I've ever had, easily, because it's mission-driven, and the mission is our nation's security in many ways and spreading the idea of a free press around the world. But, I would dedicate my remarks to our journalists in the field. The tape we just looked at says it all, and the commitment to telling the truth goes as deep as our journalists putting their lives on the line every day. And to them, all of us say thank you, and I say thank you for giving me the opportunity to lead.
Very, very touching and very inspirational, characteristically inspirational remarks from you, John. I know all of us owe you an immense debt of gratitude, as does the nation. And thank you. The board is in agreement with House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Elliot Engel's recent statement in which he stressed it's important that when John steps down, there is continuity of leadership at USAGM. And the board still retains the authority to select and name a CEO, including an interim CEO who could serve until a Senate-confirmed CEO is in place. We are deliberating on this subject, and let me just leave it at that. And now it is my honor to turn it over for the last time at one of these board meetings to CEO and Director John Lansing to say a few words and give a brief report on agency operations since our last meeting. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, speaking of a great team, I have some announcements about our team that I'm really excited about. First, you all know Nazari Carew, who's down at the end of the table. Nazari, can you raise your hand? I'm very happy to report that we're promoting Nazari to Chief Global Communications Officer, overseeing all communications for the agency, and strengthening our ties, our communication ties between the 5 entities and the USAGM so that we can be as effective as possible, both at USAGM and within the entities, to communicate strategically and smartly the good work being done by our journalists around the world. So Nazari, congratulations. I'm equally as proud to announce the addition of a new Chief Information Officer, and that's James J.R. Reeves. J.R., raise your hand, please. I want to tell you a little bit about him. He'll be managing all IT policy and day-to-day operations for the agency. That includes directly overseeing the telecommunications networks, server infrastructure, data management, and IT security, which at this agency is a critical function. JR comes to USAGM from the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., where he served as their CIO for the past 3 years and came highly recommended by the United States Attorney for the D.C. District. Prior to working at DOJ, JR was Chief Engineer for the Overseas Private Investment Corporation and had a long tenure in the private sector. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Terry Balaz. Terry, raise your hand. And Peter Vasilopoulos for serving as Acting Director of IT Operations. Both Terry and Peter did a fantastic job leading the agency's IT operations. We've evolved to a point as an agency where IT is really a standalone and critical function, and that's why we brought in an expert such as JR. So JR, welcome to the team. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome Jamie Fly as the new president of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, effective August 1st. Jamie's recognized foreign policy thought leader and proven manager. Prior to joining RFERL, Jamie served as a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. In addition, Jamie was director of GMF's Future of Geopolitics in Asia programs and co-director of its Transatlantic Alliance for Securing Democracy. Jamie also previously worked as a senior staffer in the United States Congress, the National Security Council, and the U.S. Department of Defense. I want to also take this opportunity, even though she's not here, to thank Daisy Sindelar for stepping in as acting RFERL president since December 2018. I've been so impressed by her hands-on leadership, and I'm really pleased that already Daisy and Jamie have formed a really great team at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Jamie's going to go into his first 60 days here in a minute, but before he does, I just want to give him a chance to take the floor and say hello.
Thanks, John. And you actually stole my thunder earlier because although I've only been able to work with you for a few weeks, I know you have a passion for all of our journalists. And what struck me in my first 5.5 weeks on the job is just the caliber of our journalists, the courage that they show on a regular basis. And so I'm very excited to be here and talk about their work. I bring special greetings from our bureau, the RFERL Bureau in Tbilisi, where I was up until yesterday morning, where they're doing fantastic work, including in the digital space, in a very active media environment where they're holding the line on independent, objective journalism. So very proud of them and happy to be here to talk about all of my team's work.
Fantastic, Jamie. Let's welcome Jamie to the agency. So now we'll move into ICC highlights, and as it happens, we've lined up RFERL to be first, so we'll bounce it right back over to Jamie to update on the work of RFERL during his first 45 days.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to highlight 3 areas and try to be as quick as possible where we've focused a lot of our energy in recent months. The first video clip that we're going to show relates to our coverage of events in Russia. Specifically the 24/7 Russian language news channel Current Time that RFERL operates in partnership with VOA. Current Time, along with the correspondents in our Russian service, have been extensively covering a lot of the local protests in Moscow related to the mayoral elections, where Russian state authorities barred independent candidates from running for city council elections. And so we have a clip, I think, that shows some of the protest coverage that they've conducted in recent weeks.
телеканале «Настоящее время» мы начинаем специальный эфир, который посвящен протестам в Москве. Я Игорь Севрюгин. Здравствуйте. Оппозиция добивается регистрации независимых кандидатов в Мосгордуму вот уже 2 недели. В минувшие выходные полиция жестко разогнала акцию, были задержаны около 1400 человек. На связи наши корреспонденты, которые весь день сегодня будут работать в Москве на акции протеста. Это
идет вторая группа сотрудников. Вы видите, в жилетах с дубинками. Блин, осторожно, летят бутылки.
Как вас зовут?
Да я не кричал.
Как вас зовут?
Георгий.
Фамилия?
Оганезов.
Почему я не могу перейти на другую сторону?
За что? За что?
Руку отпусти! Руку отпусти! Я сказал!
Не предъявили мне никакого требования, никакого основания, вы меня задерживаете. Здесь цепочка из сотрудников ОМОНа стоит по-прежнему.
Девушка оказалась внутри этой...
Я никуда не пойду. Нет, я вам протру, у меня есть перчатки. Стойте. Отойдите!
И сейчас попробуют его догнать, он пытается убежать. Почему вы пытаетесь убежать?
Здесь, как показала практика, не работают ни наши жилеты, ни редакционные удостоверения.
Мы хотим допуска кандидатов и хотим просто, чтобы соблюдались права людей.
То есть вот смотрите, сейчас резко назад мы повернем. Сотрудники ОМОНа идут по проезжей части сейчас.
Кого вы бьете? Кого вы бьете? Кого вы бьете?
As you saw, a lot of our protest coverage, which actually played out weekend after weekend through July and August, was live, involved multiple correspondents on the scene, including bringing in experts for live interviews. And I'm told that this is basically a rarity in Russian language media, and live coverage basically doesn't exist for most events like this. These protests were largely ignored by Russian state media. So the work of Current Time and our Russian service was one of the few ways that people could actually find out about the details of the protest and give them an opportunity to judge the events on the ground themselves. And as you saw, the unpredictable nature of the live coverage, I think, really brought home what was going on throughout that live coverage. Various vignettes emerged, stories that our team then followed up on. This is just one example, which you saw some of the video coverage that I thought was particularly powerful, but this was a still photo that was captured by not one of our people, but a photographer who was there. And it shows Current Time journalist Timur Olevsky interviewing a protester, Grigory Oganezov, who said he was an innocent passerby, just caught up in the protests. And he was the same individual you saw in the video, was then being beaten by police. And so I think, for me, this image became emblematic of what our work is all about. Giving voice to the voiceless and making certain that the truth about local and national events in Russia is available to the Russian people. So that those protests have been a significant part of our effort in recent weeks. I'm going to move now to Central Asia and pick up on some of the themes you saw in the video earlier about the pressure our journalists are under. I actually took my first trip as president of RFERL to visit 3 of our bureaus in Central Asia, in Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. And in all 3 countries, our journalists are under significant pressure of different types, even as in many of those markets, they are essentially the premier independent news source for local politics and other issues that the population is interested in. They're also all 3 doing increasingly important work about the role that China is playing in their countries. And just to tell you one anecdote that I heard from a local journalist who does not work for us in Tajikistan, he said, because you at Radio Ozadi, which is the name of our Tajik service, are here and you report on A, B, and C in Tajikistan, we Tajik journalists can at least report on A. And so I heard this again and again throughout the region, and also even in places like Tbilisi over the weekend and on Monday, where our services play this role in at least pushing aside some of the state interference in media and creating at least a small space that other news organizations can operate in. The challenges they face in Tajikistan, as was highlighted in the video, our journalists are being harassed by security services on a regular basis. The government is denying an increasing number of our journalists accreditation, making it more difficult for them to operate. And in Kazakhstan, and I think we have a video clip that was shown earlier, our journalists have been repeatedly attacked by what we believe are state-sponsored vigilantes. The police, despite the fact that there are multiple surveillance videos like this of our people being attacked, and we actually have identified some of the specific individuals, the police have shown no interest in actually conducting an investigation. The other thing to note about this particular incident, and I actually walked in that hallway 2 weeks ago and met with the human rights activists who were trying to hold the press conference that was broken up. One of our journalists at the time was actually a female journalist who was 7 months pregnant and was being attacked and pushed to the floor by those attackers, in addition to the physical damage to our camera equipment. In Kyrgyzstan, where we actually are able to operate much more freely than in its neighbors, we have problems with other types of pressure. There we're dealing with trolling from unknown sources. We're not sure if it's foreign governments outside of Kyrgyzstan going after our journalists, or vested interests, given some of the anti-corruption work that we're doing there. We're trying to undermine our ability to operate. In all three countries, though, I met with government officials, civil society, and outside groups, and I made very clear that whatever type of pressure we're facing, whether it's physical, whether it's government harassment, or whether it's trolling aimed at our anti-corruption work, that we're not going to allow to deter our journalists from continuing to operate and to do their jobs. And the heartening thing in my early weeks has been to see how, despite this pressure that people are dealing with on a daily basis, our journalists still continue to come to work and take risks and just keep focused on their core mission. Finally, I just wanted to highlight one example of the great digital work being done by our team across RFERL. An example of what our Iran service, Farda, is doing on Instagram, which is a growing platform for them. They're using graphics and other means to tell a story, in this case, about the state of Iran's economy. And they're finding that this actually is achieving significant growth, a lot of attention. They're outpacing other broadcasters targeting the Iran audience on Instagram in recent months in terms of interactions with users. And we're going to continue to deepen our engagement on Instagram and any other platform that we're allowed to use in closed countries like Iran. So I think with that, I'll close out. I just want to say I've been very impressed again by the commitment of our journalists to our mission. And in Prague right now, we're gearing up to celebrate the 30th anniversary of 1989. We'll be having more to report, hopefully, on that at the next board meeting about how we're doing that. But I've been talking to a lot of the staff about Václav Havel's admonition regarding living in truth, which at RFERL is incredibly important to us, since Havel brought us to Prague, welcomed us to Prague as an organization almost 25 years ago. And I've been very impressed to see that our journalists across all 26 language services live every day abiding by that mission of living in truth and are deeply committed to it. I'm very proud to lead them and look forward to continuing to update you in the future about how we take all of these operations to the next level going forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Governors, any questions, comments? Really great work. Turning now to VOA, Amanda's going to talk to you and show you some tape regarding an incredible project they're doing right now of the highest quality I've seen in a long time regarding the 400th anniversary of slavery, called Africa to America, the Odyssey of Slavery. And VOA did this in partnership with Norfolk State University. But first, I think she wants to, and I hope she will, discuss a friend and colleague that we lost recently at VOA, and somebody very, very special. So Amanda, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, John. I just want to note the passing last month of cancer of Akbar Ayazi, who was just an absolutely critical heart and soul of Voice of America, and we're all going to miss him. He also was the Southeast Asia director of regional director in RFE for a period of time, overseeing our broadcast to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and Iraq. He was educated in Kabul. He himself was Afghani, and his passing was noted by Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, who called him a pioneer of Afghan journalism. We're all going to miss him tremendously, and just hope that you all will continue to hold him in your minds and thoughts. Let me now move to our coverage, which Our mission, we've made it very clear from the beginning of our team's operations at Voice of America, is to tell America's story, both good and bad. You've seen some of the good things we've done in terms of the Silicon Valley Bureau that we opened, but we also wanted to talk to our foreign audiences of one of the unfortunately key pieces of America's story, which is the story of slavery. But not just telling our story, we wanted to bring to it something that only we can do, which is to link America's story of slavery with the story of its origins in Africa. So I'd like to show you a little clip of a town hall that we conducted in Norfolk, Virginia, very close to the original site of the landing of the first ships bearing slaves. And it's had already more than 250,000 video views in the Hausa language alone, which I think just shows you the interest that people have in this story. So please.
Angola looks so peaceful, but what happened here 400 years ago was not.
In 1619, a European ship landed in colonial Virginia with an unexpected cargo.
The ship came up the Chesapeake Bay and it landed here at Point Comfort in the latter part of August of 1619.
Africans arrived against their will. First a few, then many. Human cargo traded to the early settlers.
The Kwanza River, which empties into the Atlantic just south of Luanda, was an important trade route. Beginning in the late 1400s, slave traders in what is now Angola took part in transatlantic human trafficking. Historians say the Portuguese took much of the historical records when they left Angola after
the name of the slave, gender, place of birth or origin, age, identifying marks, occupation, and at the end are notes where we can see the date of capture.
In 1617, they founded the port city of Benguela. There, this building, which is now Angola's National Archaeology Museum, was once a way station for thousands of human captives. Centuries of colonization and slavery scarred Angola, as did recent decades of civil war. Today, the country has the third largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, but at least a third of its 30 million people live in poverty. At the Colégio Caju Middle School in Luanda, in the studies of slavery, teachers are careful not to provoke resentment over race.
I'd like to tell young Americans, do not hold onto resentment. Now we have to be more correct, have better ideas than our ancestors, and prevent slavery from happening again.
We live in the United States. United means that we're all in this together. But people aren't getting treated fairly because people are not doing the right thing, and we should all do the right thing because we're in this together.
Powerful stuff. Governors, questions, comments? All right, thank you, Amanda. And now we're going to go to OCB and Tomas with talk about OCB's climate change series on the history of Havana and Miami.
Thank you, John. And as we speak, we are following a development story that began last weekend when about 60 opposition leaders were arrested in Cuba, their homes ransacked by the police. And the purpose was to avoid a peaceful protest that was going to take place on the day of the patron saint of Cuba, Our Lady of Charity. Today, we're following also the 33rd day of a hunger strike by Guillermo del Sol, an independent journalist who works also for Radio Marti. He does a report. He's protesting that Cuba is violating its own constitution because they do not allow journalists or civil society leaders or religious leaders to travel when invited to international events. But as John mentioned, we're very proud of two series. One is about climate change. This is the first time in the history of Radio and TV Marti that we have done a comprehensive series of programs about climate change, sea level rise, and the impact on the United States and on Cuba. We had like 10 PhD, and the program was hosted by Dr. Frances Colon. She is a PhD in biology and also was a former science advisor to the State Department for 7 years in the past administration. She now is a scholar, and also a series about the 500th anniversary of the city of Miami and comparison with the city of Miami. Here's that video.
Radio Marti presents Climate Change, a special series that examines global warming and its impact on our planet. The rise in global temperatures, droughts, the increase in the intensity of atmospheric severe weather conditions, sea level rise, and saltwater intrusion. Hosted by biologist and American science diplomat, Dr. Frances Colon, together with a panel of experts, examine how climate change impacts South Florida and what responsibilities governments have to confront it.
Hola, soy la doctora Frances Colón y quiero invitarlos a escuchar por Radio Martí la nueva serie Cambio Climático.
Hay que entender que el problema no es subir las mareas, es que va a subir el nivel medio del mar.
Ver la fauna y sentirte parte de ella. Definitivamente siento una gran necesidad de ver más.
La ciudad de La Habana es como una dama, que siempre ha sido una dama en todo sentido de la palabra y hoy en día está vestida de harapos.
Y era un crimen, tú sabes, ver esas edificaciones tan lindas cayéndose a pedazos. Me dolió muchísimo, ¿verdad? Me dolió porque yo creo que yo siento más por La Habana que por el resto de Cuba. O sea, mi amor a La Habana es más grande que el amor a Cuba. Y me dolió muchísimo.
Havana, Miami, the success and the abandonment. Radio and Television Marti's special series examines 500 years of the founding of the city of Havana and 123 years of the city of Miami. The residents of Havana have their dreams, plans, complaints, and demands. Miami, with its development and influence. Interviews, testimonials, memories, anecdotes, facts, and slice-of-life stories that tell of living in both Miami and Havana.
Es una ciudad como Alepo, Siria, ¿no? Y eso es parte de la realidad cubana.
And John and governors, since we start promoting this series about 3 weeks ago, we have gotten more than 50 new videos and and audios from residents of Havana saying, "Me too, I want to participate." So we're thinking on 40 shows that would run almost to October, but we are expanding because we are getting so much content from Havana that is incredible. And finally, today we are running a series also about the 41st anniversary of the start of the military intervention of Cuba in Angola. We found recently declassified documents from Zbigniew Brzezinski and to President Carter, from the CIA to the president, with details of how thousands and thousands of Cubans were sent to Angola and how each Cuban costed $4,000 to the Agostinho Neto regime. It is funny that we learned that teachers cost $2,000 a month and soldiers $4,000 a month. And it's also funny to hear the Secretary of State at that time during the Carter administration saying that without the Cuban regime supporting the regime of Agostinho Neto in Angola will fall. That's exactly what they're saying about Maduro today. So that's the report, John.
Thank you, Tomas. Turning now to RFA, where, as you would expect, they're doing really excellent coverage of the unrest and protest in Hong Kong, protesting, as you know, the new extradition law that allows the rendition of criminal suspects to mainland China. And so the RFA staff from Mandarin and Cantonese services and from the Taiwan and Washington, D.C. offices are involved. Libby Liu is off on travel today, so we're fortunate to have executive editor Bei Fang in to present its three-part video series looking at the history of the democracy movement, the identity of Hong Kong youth and how it has evolved, and that protest movement today. So Bei, take it away.
Thank you so much, John. So we've had reporters, as you know, on the ground since day one of the protests. They've been doing hours of live feeds and refusing to stop working even after they fell victim to tear gas attacks. But we recently just decided that what was missing in the coverage, because of how much international coverage there's been, we answered calls from some of our mainland audience, whose news consumption is almost 100% controlled by the CCP, is that deeper context behind the protests, because many of the young people were born after the handover of Hong Kong governance from British to Chinese rule in 1997. So they actually believe the official narrative that the protesters are violent separatists, that there is a foreign agent that's backing them. And one of these narratives is basically, if not for foreign interference, why is it that they'd be launching this pro-democracy movement now when there wasn't actually democracy, during British rule? So we decided that it was our responsibility, as one of the few independent voices left in Hong Kong, to do this three-part kind of a mini documentary and try to answer their questions and look into some of the others that we thought would give them a more complete picture of what's actually going on in Hong Kong. One of the things that we actually found was in the British National Archive, we found the original document that proves that the British government did seek true democracy for Hong Kong in the 60s, but that Premier Zhou Enlai threatened to bring the PLA into Hong Kong if that happened. So anyway, I'll let our reporting speak for itself.
可以看到的很多游行人士呢，已經佔據了現場，就是整條的馬路。
當有100萬人上街嘅時候，你唔理；有200萬人上街，你都唔理。咁呢個政府係乜嘢政府呢？
If we continue to tolerate, accommodate, and accept demands because of those protests, that would be a very inappropriate and acceptable response from the government.
Do you hear the people sing, sing Beijing has already taken advantage of Hong Kong for 22 years.
"不自由，情願死。"
Anything else, Bay? That's really great. And I also want to mention VOA is also on the ground in Hong Kong, and as they do in their role, telling America's story. They have over 15 congressional interviews on the subject. They have correspondents on the ground taking live fire with rubber bullets and 7 hours of continuous live streaming. So the combination of VOA and RFA has just been exceptional. Speaking of telling America's story, I want to turn to Alberto and MBN. If you think about it, you think about our grantees are doing, as we say, surrogate reporting, and VOA tells America's story. But MBN really does both. It's a surrogate reporter in the region, and it's also telling America's story. And Alberto is going to give you an example of doing just that with a new series that provides viewers in the region a deeper insight into America and the American people. So, Alberto.
Thank you, John. Indeed, last time I spoke to the board, I spoke of our new investigative unit, and that certainly is part of our surrogate role that we play in Arabic. But we also seek to deepen an understanding of the United States. We've noticed that among the most viewed digital reports that MBN produces are stories about the United States. People in the region are interested in U.S. foreign policy, of course, but also about America and the American people. And this is a niche which Al Hurra must lead in regularly. As part of our transformation, we've placed special emphasis on reporting on the United States with the daily hour-long newscasts dedicated to news from the U.S. and weekly interview programs that discuss U.S. foreign policy. But we also have programs that have taken viewers outside of D.C. to show a fuller picture of America. One of them is a 6-part series, Huna America, with veteran journalist Hisham Melhem, which seeks to examine the history of American events that shaped it, such as our founding fathers and the creation of the Constitution, the Civil War, and the institution of slavery. A second part of this effort is an 11-part series currently airing now called My Story, which profiles Arab Americans who left their homelands in the Middle East and why they left, to a country that offered them refuge and opportunity they could not get anywhere else. Those profiles include things such as Syrian refugee who fled from ISIS and came to live with a Jewish family in Massachusetts to restart her life and get medical treatment for her daughter who is suffering from muscular dystrophy. A Lebanese dancer who came to New York and dances for Cirque du Soleil and hopes to inspire other Middle Eastern dancers to go after their dream, even though the profession is not held in high esteem in the region. And a Palestinian immigrant who created a foundation that promotes innovative ideas that positively impact the community. Let's look at the video.
right, thank you, Alberto.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments?
Yeah, we saw in the introductory clips issues that you're dealing with now in Iraq with El Hura. Any update on that?
I want to go in great detail on that in the closed board of directors meeting. I'll tell you where we stand right now. The Iraqi government, the Communications Commission, issued to the press this notice of suspension a week ago. We actually received it by hand in our hands, which is when supposedly takes place this Monday. There's a legal process that happens of appeal, which is being undertaken right now. So our written appeal to the Iraqi government, our reclama, as it were, is happening this week, and so we'll have more clarity in the next few days. But I'm happy to go in with much greater granularity in the closed meeting.
Thank you, Alberto. Anybody else? Okay, turning the corner here to finish up. On July 10th, I testified before the House Appropriations, State, and Foreign Ops Subcommittee about our efforts to counter Russian propaganda and disinformation. And thanks to Marta McClellan-Ross for arranging for that to happen, and I've asked her to give highlights of that hearing. Marta?
Thank you, John. And I'd just also like to note the contribution of Adam Tracy, who's our appropriations lead, and I just got an email from him in this meeting that our Senate markup has been postponed indefinitely. We're so grateful to Chairwoman Lowy and Ranking Member Rogers for the opportunity to testify before the House Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations. This hearing was an opportunity for John to highlight the broad scope of USAGM's work against Russian disinformation, including the strategy and success of Current Time, VOA, and RFERL's Russian language services, and the fact-checking websites Polygraph and Factograph. Members were also interested in USAGM's work in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and the decision to relaunch Bulgarian and Romanian services this year, and also the considerations of Hungary at the time. CEO Lansing testified again, alongside Leah Gabriel, the State Department's Global Engagement Center Special Coordinator, and Jim Kulikowski, the Coordinator for U.S. Assistance to Europe. And in the conversation, John was able to speak about the firewall and its role in building credibility among USAGM audiences, while also explaining how USAGM and the GEC and State Department overall can coordinate on larger policy issues. And during this hearing's second panel of non-government witnesses, Alina Polyakova from the Brookings Institution and Nina Jankowicz from Wilson Center offered strong support for USAGM's work through VOA and RFERL, and even advocated to the committee for additional funding, which was a strong validation of USAGM's work before the committee. So here's a short clip of the hearing's highlights.
What I would be interested in, Madam Chair, and I thank you for this hearing, is to have a comparison between how much we're spending on tanks and bombers and so forth versus how much we're spending to counter this cyber warfare, because it seems to me that this is the war of the... Are we in the 21st century? Yes.
I do think RFERL has been very effective in its current time program that we saw the presentation of.
I would say that these entities face the same issues that U.S. media outlets are facing right now. They are competing in a very crowded information environment. They need more funding, just like the New York Times and local media outlets in the United States need in order to compete in this environment. It's not easy, but we need to understand that journalism is a public good and continue investing in that. I think that's critical.
Are we really using advanced digital information space?
In the 4 years that I've been leading USAGM, we've had a dramatic shift towards digital platforms, where in the past our primary method for reaching audiences was through, frankly, shortwave radio and some television. Well, our most recent efforts, including the Current Time network that we just discussed, are all digital first. 540 million video views on social media platforms. And we're measuring our work not just by reach, but we're holding ourselves accountable to you and this committee based on our impact. And so we have measurements of impact that we measure every day against our media. And what are those measurements of impact? Do people find our information trustworthy? Do they share it? Do they like it? Do they do something with the information?
To address the question about RFERL and VOA, I have found these resources to be invaluable, not only in their English language coverage, which is one of the most important sources for informing experts like myself when we're not on the ground, but also their local language services are invaluable. I know the Georgian protests, which happened a couple of weeks ago, I turned to RFERL, my Georgian friends were turning to RFERL to look for coverage of the protests, especially in a politicized media environment like in Georgia.
You asked, how are the Russians influencing parts of the world where we're seeing backsliding in democratic institutions? Well, we're seeing that more and more, as you know, in even NATO countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Hungary. And so just this year, we expanded Radio Free Europe's coverage into Romanian, and Bulgaria, so that we're there now present where we weren't before because it had become more democratic. And now that it's backslid, we're in there now confronting Russian disinformation and lies with truthful and factual information. We're also at this very moment exploring an expansion into Hungary as well. The very fundamental strategy of the Kremlin when it creates an attempt to disrupt a democratic society is to just sow chaos. It's about making the truth seem so elusive that nothing can be believed. And so that's the battlefield that we're on, and we're engaged on many, many levels, both in terms of our journalism and our content, but also through our fact-checking websites that are on an hourly basis disputing Russian lies with facts and truthfulness. It's becoming more and more expensive because the Russians are sparing no expense in disrupting all of these democratic institutions.
I can't believe that how difficult it is. We can't win this battle. We know it's a battle, but we've got to win.
That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. CEO, and I think all of us can see the incredible progress that the agency has made under your leadership. And this board meeting, as every other since you've taken over 4 years ago, is proof to all of us and the people around the world of all the incredible work that you and the team here at across the board at USAGM and at the various other entities have done. So thank you. Let me ask if there are any questions from any of the governors before we move to wrap things up. I hear none. The next board meeting is going to be held here. It's scheduled here at USAGM headquarters on November 14th, 2019. I'll work closely with my fellow governors and the interim CEO to develop the agenda for this meeting. I encourage all governors to give me, the interim CEO, or staff input on topics you wish to have addressed at the next meeting. Do any governors wish to adjourn this meeting? Governor Kempner, is there a second? Governor, that's Governor Aaron. Beat you to the punch, Ambassador Crocker. Okay, once again, you got to pick up the pace, pal. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, they're hearing no no's. This concludes the formal meeting of the USAGM Board of Governors. I want to thank everyone for all the hard work that went into this, and again, I want to commend John and everyone around the table for the immense progress at this agency. Thank you.
Sí.